At 4:50, October 19, 2025, 7 Ukrainian unmanned surface vessels closed in on an inviolable coastal base near Sevastopol, Crimea. Inside, over 1,000 Cuban mercenaries and a string of senior Russian officers massing, not for a parade, not to greet Putin, but to plan a desperate counterstroke, Moscow's last-ditch effort to salvage a collapsing front. Reuters reports, Cuba is actively supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with roughly 1,000 to 5,000 Cuban troops fighting alongside Russian forces on the Kharkiv-Siversk front. As Moscow's combat power bleeds out day by day, each Cuban unit is a last drop of blood fed into a dying heart. The landing info was passed from U.S. intelligence straight to the Ukrainian military. And right now, 12.5 miles away, a line of black hulls, 18 feet long, slices the dark sea. They are 7 Kiev-built USV Magura V5s, low-profile, stealthy surface drones designed to be hard to pick up on coastal surveillance radar. The Magura pack is closing on a coastal staging base where Allied reinforcements, quietly funneled into the fight by Russia, stand ready to charge Ukrainian positions. The makeshift base is shielded by layered, state-of-the-art defenses, stacked one over another. The Kremlin believes this facility untouchable. Ukraine is about to prove otherwise. At 4:55, 3 miles offshore, the 7 USVs throttle back, almost motionless on the water. The steel hatch in each hull swings open, and one by one, 5 UAVs launch from each boat. A total of 35 kamikaze UAVs, 8-inch steel frames, quad-prop motors, and a 7,000 mAh battery pack, manufactured in Kiev one day prior. The lead Magura hoists the sensor, an IR electro-optical module with AI, yawing gently, locking the target. The field barracks are in the gun sight, nowhere to run. All 35 loitering munitions receive the mothership's signal. They spool up and sprint at 75 miles per hour toward the shoreline. The plan is brutal in its simplicity. Not a straight suicide dive, but a very low approach, constantly changing angles to evade radar. Then a single, murderous run into the field barracks. The 5 lead UAVs, unarmed, execute a move no one expects. Each sprays 25,000 strips of aluminum shrapnel, 0.01 meters wide. 125,000 fragments form a screening curtain trailing hundreds of meters along the flight path, big enough to blanket and blind the radar for the 30 real attack UAVs flying at just 32 feet altitude. It becomes a nightmare for the Pantsir S-1. The Russian short-range engagement radar catches the UAV swarm for exactly 2 seconds. Then the screen floods white, tracks jump and scramble, then go dark. The battery is blinded by an artificial dust cloud of metal. The crew fights to keep a track. The Pantsir opens up. 357 E-6E missiles burn off the rails, white streaks ripping the night. The 1RS-2-1 fire control radar thinks it's locked, or at least it believes so. At that instant, the 125,000 aluminum strips begin to play their part. The fire control radar is overwhelmed by reflections. The returns are no longer UAV signatures, but a virtual wall, bright, smeared, and wildly unstable. The scope fills with identical clutter, all returns matching speed and heading. The Pantsir fire computer can no longer tell what's real. The system starts retuning its decoy filtering algorithms. 3 UAVs carrying EW jammers inside the formation switch on. The jamming band precisely matches the control and missile guidance channels. Guidance links flutter and collapse. The problem isn't the missile. The problem is how it's being guided. Pantsir missiles have no active IR seeker, no self-contained radar seeker. They fly because something on the ground walks them. The 1RS-2-1 fire control radar and the associated radio link, the helmet-style guidance feed. In a distorted signal environment, with bands stuffed full of false carriers, the central guidance node can no longer resolve updated target coordinates. The fire control radar loses feedback, the radio link severs. The 1RS-2-1 keeps trying, but a guidance system without an autonomous seeker, when jammed, is just a gun crew shouting into the void. The first missile veers violently, swings an abnormal 656 feet, then detonates in mid-air without contacting anything. The second missile continues on, but no longer receives updates. It locks onto a phantom radar spike reflected by the metallic cloud and then loses the track entirely. The third missile was fired in automatic mode, but the computer latched onto a false track about 260 feet away. It chased a ghost and detonated into cold nothingness. The Panzer's control loop is pushed to processing limits. Approach speed is too high, target count overwhelms real-time classification, and the whole scope flips into overload. 3 missiles, 3 misses. Not a single kamikaze UAV brought down. Panzer still has the 30mm guns, but the engagement window has shrunk to seconds. In the chaos, the pack punches through the kill zone, nothing left to stop them. A few kilometers away, a Russian early warning post reports nothing abnormal. No UAVs, no acoustic signatures, no clear radar blips. Only a few missile plumes from the Panzer, then an inexplicable white mid-air detonation. Lookouts tilt their heads up. All they see are ephemeral flashes of light exploding in the sky. No tangible targets appear. They convince themselves it was a successful intercept. They are wrong. What Panzer just shot down was bait. The missiles were duped. The real targets have yet to reveal themselves. Everything they just saw was only a simulated demonstration. The real war had not begun. At just 32 feet above the sea, the real kamikaze UAV swarm lay hidden. They did not rush. They waited for the moment. On the defensive radar screen near the billets, nothing. No contacts, no warnings. Then, suddenly, a shout from Watch Post 3. Strange thermal signature at 295 feet, speed 75 miles per hour, bearing southeast. The IR camera on the roof had picked up a cluster of thermal returns rushing in. Nobody had time to make sense of it. The heat plume moved like a trail of burning ants, bowing into an arc and accelerating frame by frame. Before the lieutenant on duty could react, the glass exploded inward, and a gust of wind brought the high-pitched scream of mini-engines. The kamikaze UAVs appeared. Too low, too fast, too close. Each had pre-locked a target. No guidance, no feedback. Each carried an HE warhead, precisely 11 pounds of explosive, and hundreds of fragmentation pieces, ready to punch through flesh and structure. The Panzer S-1 battery finally understood the picture. The radar was blind. The missiles were expended. Only the twin 2 A38M 30mm autocannons remained, the last living guns on the system. Guns switched to manual, traverse limited, rounds spraying into empty air like a desperate grab at anything that might stop the strike. Shells tore the air, but hit nothing. The swarm split. They did not all hit the same point. They divided into 2 attack axes, each group slamming a separate billet in the compound. One element approached from the east flank, driving into the meeting hall roof where Cuban mercs and Russian officers were conducting an internal briefing. The second element swung around to the rear, striking the command sleeping quarters and the troops, lights still on. The first wave, 20 aircraft, did not faint. They sprinted at top speed, hugging the ground, maintaining a crescent formation. 20 streams of fire punched through the roof, shearing composite ceilings and insulation walls like paper. Then, everything was consumed by a double blast, part from the UAV warheads, part from fuel, gas, and stored munitions igniting in a chain. Blast overpressure exceeded 3 bar, enough to strip 3 rows of temporary steel frame huts clean. High-altitude recon UAV footage recorded a red-orange fireball, blooming like a shockwave, throwing objects outward more than 65 feet. A vertical smoke pillar, taller than 195 feet, rose as if a tactical bomb had detonated on site. The entire billet complex disintegrated. Inside, hundreds of Cuban mercenaries and at least 8 Russian officers had no time to escape. None survived. Bodies were blown apart, spines shattered, skulls fragmented, or worse, unidentifiable. The second cluster, the remaining 10, cut the flank and hit the engineering quarter at the rear, power plant and ground communications vehicles. Precision was unnecessary. A hit to exposed equipment would do. That cluster detonated 4 seconds later, knocking out the western power grid, severing signal and destroying C2 links. Alarm calls from the coordination center ceased. Radars stopped turning. The entire compound went dark, crippled. Subsequent satellite analysis estimated the billet zone wiped out with an annihilation radius of 130 feet. No metallic piece left intact. Black smoke jutted skyward like a death banner. The ground still trembled from aftershocks. The air tasted of burning fuel and hot metal. Forward rescue teams, 2 armored ambulances carrying combat medics and an EOD squad, approached the perimeter. They did not advance immediately. Every step was measured by sight and instinct. A high-cover recon drone streamed thermal imagery to the forward command. The FLIR painted bright red patches, hot points still burning. Air support arrived. 2 medvac helicopters flew low, one to lift critically wounded directly to a field hospital in the city, the other carrying a surgical team, supplies, and a refrigerated container for bodies. Chaos with order. A Russian officer lay gasping, losing blood. Groups of Cuban troops convulsed from thermal shock and smoke inhalation. A few were trapped under rubble. The brutal fact, not everyone could be saved. The dead were covered, logged, and a temporary morgue set up away from the aid tents. The Russian Defense Ministry convened an emergency meeting. No video, no public satellite images, only a terse press line. Russian air defenses intercepted a UAS attack, minor damage reported. Inside the Kremlin, the truth was different. Over half the reinforcement Cuban contingent was dead, others critically wounded, senior officers reduced to burned corpses. The forward camp was erased from the map, irrecoverable for at least 6 months. Russian diplomacy faltered. The Cuban government issued no statement, but intelligence sources reported at least 3 transport aircraft rushed bodies back to Havana. No flags, no insignia, no names. When the nameless coffins returned to Havana in silence, no funeral fanfare, no media, no national emblem draped, the deaths of over 1,000 Cuban troops on Russian soil became more than a military tragedy. It became a slap to Havana's foreign policy, the terrible cost of unconditional dependence on Moscow. Each anonymous body repatriated testified to a painful truth. Cuba had gambled its people's blood and lost. On the geopolitical board, Havana now faced not only U.S. sanctions, but international condemnation for aiding an aggressive war. And in the Ukrainian campaign HQ, hundreds of kilometers away, deep underground under an armored operations center, the tech team sat before dozens of screens. No cheers, no applause, only short nods. Final data were encrypted and archived. The display read, 0% own losses, 100% targets destroyed.